Hello and welcome to the Breach Report again. This week's episode of the Breach Report, we cover one of the largest ransomware attacks in history, impacting up to 1,500 companies. The breach I'm talking about, of course, is Kaseya, which has come to a staggering conclusion of a $70 million ransom note. We'll cover some of the ransomware terms, the methods, and indicators of compromises of the attack, and where we're at today with that. I'm Josh Allen, and with me is Jason Furch. To start us off, what is Kaseya, Jason, and what kind of business are they? What do they do?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Josh. So Kaseya is a partner. They partner with MSPs, managed services providers. Those are typically like your IT support. They run the day-to-day operations of your business, right? And so they partner with MSPs and they install these agents on the computers. In this case, an RMM tool, so remote management and monitoring tools. And so the purpose for this is it streamlines IT operations for your help desk teams, for your IT directors, all of these different aspects of what it takes to run your IT organization. Things like asset tracking, software tracking, warranties. They can basically assign, a user to a given laptop. They can pull the service tags, all this other stuff. And again, like I said, it streamlines the IT operations. So it's a huge help in that arena.
Gotcha. So when they were attacked, who was that ultimately impacted by this attack?
Right, yeah. So there was, it's really the MSPs themselves. So MSPs, in this case, it was about 50 of the 37,000 clients that Kaseya has. And it doesn't sound like a lot. It ends up being about 0.001% of the total client base. But what's really interesting about this is each MSP has clients of their own. And in this case, every single one of those clients of those MSPs that were impacted were also affected. So we're talking in the neighborhood of between 800 and 1,500 companies in total.
That's a pretty big impact.
It's interesting because I wonder, like, 0.001% doesn't sound like a lot, but then when you do actually get into it, the whole breadth of the attack is a little bit more staggering than, some reports might lead on to be.
Certainly, yeah, thousands of computers is quite profitable for, somebody like this.
Yeah, right. So, when we actually take a look at the attack itself, Josh, who is responsible for it?
So there's a ransomware as a service gang called REvil. They are also known as Sodinokibi. They're a Russian language gang, and they're really a full-fledged red team. Not even a red team; it's a black hat red team, right? So they, as I said, ransomware as a service. They actually sell what they do to anybody who wants to ransom something, and they do their own campaigns as well. So they're responsible for more than 300 ransomware campaigns per month. That's
Wow.
according to this company called KPN. I think we actually have an article to bring up here about it. So KPN has been tracking REvil for quite some time. They've done a lot of work on attribution, and so we see that in last year in August was 200, September was 100, October was 400, November 300, and December also 300. And that's number of campaigns that they ran. So each of those campaigns had different levels of success rates, and they've really been an extremely active player in the ransomware field.
So, real quick, Josh, I'm just curious. There's been a lot of talk in the media about an association with the Russian government. In this case, does our evil have any association with the Russian government?
No, not in this case. It's not like, an APT, a state sponsor, like you'd be thinking. This is a purely for-profit criminal organization.
Gotcha. And so, kind of taking a look back at the KPN article, there are certain organizations that are actually been attacked by REvil in the past, right?
Yeah, so they've gone after some pretty major corporations, but they go after some just really anybody. Like we see some, if you scroll down, there's this chart here that shows some really major campaigns that kicked off, and they were against uh, MSPs, as Kaseya is, but also childcare centers, dentist offices, beauticians, anybody really who is an opportunity to spread, and somebody who's really reliant upon their IT infrastructure. So they're kind of indiscriminate, really.
Right, and a lot of these organizations that you mentioned, especially beauticians, they're not really known to have
Right.
robust security practices.
Exactly. But those aren't their only targets. They've also gone after major supply lines that do have robust security, like JBS Meats was a huge one that happened this year. Quanta, which is a Taiwanese company that sells data center gear to Apple, they've got some pretty good IT budget there. So yeah, they're really all over the map. It's anybody and everybody that they can make a buck off of.
Right. And so let's dig into the real meat of the conversation here. How did the Kaseya attack happen?
So why don't you go ahead and pull up the Sophos one here, and we can kind of dive into that a little bit. But where it started out is REvil gang attacked Kaseya's platform, their hosted platform, and they used some 0 days to gain access and distribute malware to their customers. And then once distributed to their customers' computers, that's where they actually began using weaknesses on those systems to start encrypting everything. So what we see here on Sophos, I think the first thing we want to talk about is this agentmon.exe. That's Kaseya's VSA agent. That's the A, right? So this thing is deployed out to their customers systems, and it's responsible for pulling things from the Kaseya servers, the platforms that they have up in the cloud. Supposed to be the monitoring software. They communicate back and forth and they receive updates. There's quite a few things you can do with these. So what has happened here is they wrapped their malware in this service and distributed it throughout. They use the whole supply line, right? It does a few things. What happens there is, because it's already wrapped in the platform, it's been signed by Kaseya's platform. It's getting past everything on these client systems, so it looks like legitimate Kaseya traffic when it's actually a bunch of installers for malware.
Right. And so, real quick, what do you mean when you say signing the malware?
So it's digitally signed, like drivers from Microsoft might be, or any trusted platform software. You've probably seen this when you go to install things on your computer. Some things say they're not from a trusted publisher, and you have to kind of confirm that. So uh, this is that's one part of it, but the other part of it is when it comes to endpoint detection response and other security monitoring tools, they're also seeing this as a signed publisher executable, and so they're going to typically ignore it, or they've been tuned in some way to not need to dig into it, or something like that, depending on how it's configured. So it
Gotcha.
really allows evasion ultimately.
Right. So yeah. So I was just going to ask that it's obfuscating. It's getting around the security tools or controls that are already deployed.
Correct.
Gotcha. So when we're looking at this attack and the breach in total, what are some of the indicators of compromise?
So Kaseya has released, and there's an article we have linked there. They've released these IOCs. There's a set of IP addresses, some file names that will try to be executing on the endpoint system with specific MD5 hashes that you can check against. There's also some web log indicators, so you'll see some web traffic if you're monitoring your web traffic as well, if your server, for example, has been compromised. So we'll link this on the uh, video as well.
And then in terms of this attack, and I know at the beginning of the year, even before then, SolarWinds hit. So can you walk us through how the Kaseya breach is a little bit different from the SolarWinds attack?
Yeah, that's a really good comparison because SolarWinds was a supply chain attack as well, and that was a pretty highly polished, nasty one. SolarWinds, though, they deliver stuff directly to their customers. Like they build the security products and they deliver them, and so what was attacked there was the security products code itself. They went in and modified the code and made it malicious to do all these malware activities. So it was kind of one hop. With this, they've moved further left in the DevOps chain or further up in the logistical chain. So they're actually attacking Kaseya. Kaseya provides things to MSPs, right? So even though it's, a small, was it 50 of their customers, right? So
Mm.
50 MSPs. MSPs obviously have hundreds and thousands of customers. So this thing comes from two layers of trust as well in terms of the end client, and so it's a little bit different in those terms. And they didn't compromise Kaseya's code, and they were careful to point out that their code was not compromised. It was their platform that delivers their agents and their code that was compromised, and that was used to deliver the ransomware.
Interesting. Yeah. So just kind of a different way of doing the same thing from a supply chain attack perspective.
I think it has a higher impact too, because it's, if you think of it like uh, a tree mow, right? You've gone further up, so you can hit more and more customers with less effort, really.
Mm-hmm. So, in terms of the ransomware payment terms, can you give us a little bit of light on what REvil is asking for?
Sure. So I do have the text here of their note. I'm going to read this verbatim, and as I mentioned, they're a Russian language based ransom. Syntax is not the best here. It's just business. We absolutely do not care about you and your deals except getting benefits. If we do not do our work and liabilities, nobody will not cooperate with us. It's not in our interests. You will not cooperate with our service. For us, it does not matter. But you will lose your time and data because just we have the private key. In practice, time is much more valuable than money. Okay. So, in essence, what they're saying is, you know, we've locked your stuff. That's more expensive to you than it is to us. So, you know, pay us because we're the only ones with the private key.
Right.
And
And we. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, so what they're asking for ultimately is they want uh, money. Now, each customer is being asked for a different amount of money, but there's also a $70 million master key that they're offering. This is like the, bundle deal, right? You can unlock everything that they have locked for the low price of 70 million payable in Bitcoin.
Right. So if a nation state wanted to buy that, or maybe some rich billionaire wanted to buy that and get all that information, they could have that master key and buy it.
Sure.
So when we talked about like JBS Meats, before, I think they ended up paying $11 million for the ransom. CNA Financial were ransomed for $40 million. We're not sure, or not clear at this time whether or not they paid that amount or half of it, or how much, um, if anything, was paid. But when you take a look at this attack here on Kaseya, is this the single biggest ransomware attack in history?
Whew. That's a it's kind of a tough call. We all remember WannaCry. That was enormous in terms of the number of systems it impacted. In terms of the money they got, though, it was a lot lower. This would be the most expensive one. I don't think it would be the largest. It's definitely not the largest amount of systems impacted. So the other side of that is damage done. Now that um, we know that WannaCry caused many, many, many millions, and I think billions in damage. I don't have a specific figure. The Kaseya one, we're kind of still going to see what the actual damages cost is. So we'll see. It's certainly the most expensive one if somebody
All
were
right.
to pay it.
Yeah, and I think with the WannaCry, some of the stats that I've read is that the total impact was somewhere around 4 billion in some higher estimates, and then in some of the lower estimates, it was hundreds of millions of dollars. So
Yeah,
certainly the impact overall is quite large. So
right.
this is something. Another question I have is something that we've talked about quite a bit offline, and had several discussions on, and it's whether or not companies should actually be paying the ransom. What do you think?
No, Don't pay the ransom. There's a few reasons for that. I mean, first and foremost, the in the United States, right? The United States government has pretty much put them on the same level as terrorism. So they're going to treat cyber incidents like terrorist incidents. I think that's might be specific to nation states, but I'm not positive on that. Um, so first of all, don't pay ransoms to terrorists if that's the case. It also doesn't guarantee that they're going to unlock your stuff. Some people have been ransomed twice. Usually, you get ransomed twice. They're going to try again, and it's really just helping fund the bad guys. So you should really be calling the FBI, the Cyber Information Security Agency, and taking different avenues of dealing with this.
So I know another topic on this that we've also talked about is cybersecurity insurance, and we've kind of had our back and forths on that. And really, one of the interesting questions that I think comes out of this conversation is cybersecurity insurance enabling these attacks and making them higher and higher payouts for these attackers?
Absolutely. I mean, it's just somebody else paying the bad guys still, instead of you. And it's also kind of it's causing negligence, I think. And I'm not trying to say that everyone who has cybersecurity insurance is negligent, but it's if you've got $1 million to pay a ransom, just in case it happens, maybe you don't have as much pressure to get all of your zero trust and everything that you need to do implemented, right?
Right.
Especially
So
because you're already spending some budget on that insurance as well.
right. So just allocating those resources towards security, prevention, mitigation versus risk, right?
Versus payoffs.
The pay, right. So I
Right.
guess yeah, the payoff of it, and I was thinking more along the lines of like business risk, it's acceptable
Right.
business risk. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can also be sued by your customers and other people if you're the victim. There's a lot of other damages besides just the ransom, and that's what the cyber insurance is meant to cover now. You should have cyber insurance for those things, right? For your contracts, for your business risks, but I think insurance companies should take the paying ransom as part of cyber insurance off the table.
Gotcha. And then, this kind of begs one more question about the payments is, at what point should the government step in or, will they or should they? Two different questions there. But at what point will government step in to start helping to either subsidize this or companies of loss or actually paying the ransom themselves? I mean, we've seen in the past where, large corporations like GM, Boeing, JP Morgan, any companies that might be considered too big to fail, where you get bailouts from financial
Colonial
crises.
Pipeline. Yeah. Yeah, I mean the Colonial Pipeline one, they paid it. Something like Boeing, yeah, I mean that could be huge. Now imagine a gigantic utility or, you know, I don't know, the Department of Energy, right? If we want to talk really big. Yeah, at some point I think the government may feel that pressure to have to pay something in order to get, gas flowing or homes heated or something horrible like that in America. Absolutely.
Yeah. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I know the government's response has been really on the front line with things, or at least they're putting off the facade that they're taking things seriously, and it remains to see what's going to happen down the line with everything. But
Better than before.
right, absolutely. So one of the things that's really interesting about this attack is Kaseya's response to it. And from my perspective, they've been doing a really good job at getting information out there to not just their partners, but then downstream to MSPs, and they're working with all these third parties. Can we talk a little bit about how they've responded to this attack?
So the first thing that they did was they shut down the VSA SaaS platform. That platform that was infected and delivering the malware, they've turned it off. So no new infections can come through that vector. They've also contacted the FBI and the CISA. They've engaged third-party partners. Huntress, Sophos, I believe, is involved in some way. And they've taken upon the responsibility of dissemination to all their customers. So they've told their MSPs. Now, the MSPs should also be doing their due diligence, informing their clients and so on. They also should be doing hunting for these IOCs that Kaseya has released to them. MSP should do this, clients should do this, everyone should be looking, making sure that they're not infected and communicating with each other if they are. And so far, Kaseya has done a really good job with all of these.
Right,
It's better
actually,
than some of the we've seen before in the show.
yeah, absolutely. And it was funny because I actually saw the first time I was tuned into this attack was actually through the Reddit thread that they were publishing live.
Oh wow,
I don't
okay.
think, yeah, I don't think it was Kaseya. I think it was one of the partners, either Huntress or someone, but they were doing a live feed update throughout the entire attack.
That's really cool. Yeah, I mean, who was it? I think Cyberpunk? They had like a buried Twitter picture of, oops, something happened.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So we've talked pretty much in depth about the attack here and who's impacted and how the attack actually happened. So, what are some common ways that companies can prevent and mitigate ransomware attacks?
Ooh, man. How much time we got? So there's a lot of good traditional mitigation techniques. User education and training, automating backups, minimizing attack surface. Make sure you have an incident response plan in case you are infected. Investing in endpoint detection response tools, or monitoring detection, response, intrusion prevention. Purchase ransomware insurance. That's a thing to do today. And also the backups. Backups are huge on physical and off-site. So you need to not just have things connected to a cloud instance backing up because those can get infected as well. If you've got important data, then you need to have a real BCP and backup plan. Now, really, the best answer though is zero trust. All these different things cost money, and typically you have to go through a different config for each one. They're all usually from different vendors as well, and it's all about trying to prevent it through force, right? Now, zero trust is cool and so different in that it treats everything as its own perimeter, right? It says the only thing this piece of software or this computer or this user, I'm allowed to talk to is this user or computer or piece of software. And you can even, in some cases, change, in what way they're allowed to communicate with each other, right? And what level of access they have when they do that communication. So it cuts back a lot on the need for as much of these tools, especially throughout the institution, and it helps to minimize the splash damage, right? So, like what we have here is this is a high trust environment. Is the clients trust the MSPs trust Kaseya because they're all trusted vendors with each other. So you attack the highest, most trusted vendor, and everybody is hit by that splash damage. Whereas if it's all zero trust, wherever that vector was that they got into your system and started ransoming, it's a very limited amount of space that they have to move because of zero trust.
Right. Yeah, and I think I recall some of the companies out there, especially like the EDR tools out there, like CrowdStrike, I think was one of them, where they were able to actually look and see uh, as the attack was happening on their customers and be able to pinpoint those attacks. And obviously, that requires an actual person, butt in seat, to actually go
Yeah.
and go through and understand everything that's going on there. So zero trust seems like it's kind of like the golden. Um, uh, I don't know what the word I'm trying to look for. It's like it's the I guess the tip of the iceberg for security. It's like the gold standard. That's what I was looking for, rather.
Gold standard. Yeah, it's a really excellent goal that a lot of people should be trying to go toward. And it is hard. It is pretty expensive to get done up front, but in the long term it really does save money and time once it's up and running.
Right. And so, what should companies do if they've been impacted by ransomware?
So first of all, isolate whatever's been impacted. Don't delete it because you're going to need forensic evidence, but pull it off your network, stop it from communicating with anything else that's uninfected, right? Deploy your team to assess what's going on. Whatever team you have, whether it's your, managed service providers, SOC, you got a SOC internally. Uh, don't pay the ransom. We've talked about that before. And a big thing is start engaging your backups, right? You should already have backups at this point, and you need to look at, replacing the systems that have been infected with new systems, get the backups up on them so your business can be up and running as soon as possible. And that way you can take those isolated systems and continue, your teams can continue to do their work on there. And also call the FBI. You can report any kind of internet crime through the IC3, the ic3.gov. That's a website they set up quite a long time ago, specifically for internet crimes.
Great. And so it's been about 2 weeks now since the attack has been announced. What's the current status?
Okay, so they've engaged. We talked about they engaged their teams. They turned off delivery of the ransom. They've called the FBI, who's been involved in this. The CEO is not commenting on whether anything has been paid. He says, in quote, that he will not comment on negotiating with terrorists. Great answer. Um, and so, oh, and now allegedly REvil's website has been shut down on their domains. This just came out this week. So when you go to their, I've got a link here for you to threat post. It's really just a kind of a screenshot of their IP addresses timing out. There's nothing there on DNS. So Biden put in an order to Putin to start cracking down on hosted malware and cybercrime in that region. So perhaps this is a result of that.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of different speculation about that, whether the FBI was able to shut down their servers.
Right.
In the past, REvil's servers have gone down uh, intentionally, and then they've come back up online after a couple of hours or a couple of days or something like that. And then there's, like you just mentioned, the speculation about if Russia is actually coming down on them. I'm willing to bet that Putin's not too intimidated by the United States government on that end, but it also on the world stage, it kind of maybe makes their country look a little bad. But um, I
Who
don't know.
knows? But honestly, I mean, if I'm a ransomware gang and I hear that in the news and be like, why don't we just pivot servers and find a new place to hide on the internet?
Yeah, that seems like the logical thing. So, we've seen throughout this year, ransomware attacks have just been escalating. Ransom demands have been getting larger. The organizations that have been impacted have been, more in the headlines than any other. I mean, like we talked about, like natural resources, our food supply, things of that nature. Where do you really see the future of ransom attacks going as we, kind of get into the tail end of 2021?
I think this is a good indicator of the trend is, trying to gain higher trust, more things like these supply chain attacks, not just from ransomware gangs, but from everybody. Supply chain attacks really are the name of the game right now because it really maximizes your influence on the systems that it impacts.
Right. Yeah. I definitely don't see any slowing down of the supply chain attacks.
Oh no,
That's
I
good.
mean, they've already surpassed, just this one gang has surpassed the money they've made in H1 than they did the entire year prior. So, if you're a business, that is an amazing story to tell, for profit, right? So,
That's a good reporting when they filed with the
yeah.
SEC, right?
Yeah, right.
All right, Josh. Is there anything else about this attack you wanted to bring up?
Not this time. I think it's really interesting, and I'm gonna keep watching it. I want to see if we see their servers pop back up for sure. That's the main thing I'm gonna be looking for.
Yeah, and like all of these attacks, all of these breaches that we've covered in the past, there's always more information that comes out
Always.
several months after the fact. So we'll be keeping an eye on that, and we'll be reporting on that as it comes out. So thank you for tuning in. If you like this, hit the like button, subscribe, give us a comment below, tell us how we can improve. And until next time, thank you so much.